Gentlemen, we can start the session now. But before I hand over to Mr. Tyagaraja, can I brief the participants on a few house rules? Just keep your camera switched off and your microphones on mute. Uh, and if you have any questions, you can use the chat box to send in the questions, and we will pick it up during the Q&A session. And also, I would like to thank Facebook for being the sponsor for this event. And now let me hand over this to our moderator, Mr. Tyagaraja, to take over the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aminder. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, a very good morning to all our distinguished panelists who have accepted the invitation of the Chamber, Ceylon Chamber, for this seminar, and all you participants who have taken time to register. So it's a very timely and a very relevant topic in terms of the whole digital space and what perhaps COVID has done to all of us in maybe reshaping our thinking, removing some of our fears, and maybe also increasing our adoption in whatever way we are trying to use mobility and connectivity. But I think following from that 4 or 5 month window, I think this is a great opportunity to see how that initial momentum can be taken forward as Sri Lanka as a nation is looking to restart as to how digitalization can impact and influence the day-to-day lives of each of us in whatever we do, including business. And I think the most of you who have registered for this are either representing or being part of the membership companies of the Ceylon Chamber and or some way connected to business, be it whether it is small and medium size or large local corporates or the bigger space. So I think it's a very timely discussion. So what we propose to do is invite each of the 4 invited speakers to speak on about 10 minutes on their chosen particular area, and then we will open it for Q&A for about 30-35 minutes, which I will moderate. And as Amanda said, when it comes to that time, please use the chat to highlight your particular comments, and we'll try to include as many issues and questions you have. Ideally, it will be good if you can also direct it at a particular speaker, unless you say you want to direct and get the views of all 4 speakers. So with that, let me give a brief introduction to the 4 speakers. We have with us Mr. Kumarthunga, who is the director of the Payment and Settlements Division of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, who has been a great advocate of promoting 2020 as the year of digitalization and digital payments from a regulatory point of view. So we, some of us, or those of us who are from the banking and financial industry, have had the good fortune of having a great advocate supporting this whole cause. Then we have Channa De Silva, the Chief Executive Officer of Lanka Clear. Again, Lanka Clear, which is jointly owned by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and the member banks, I think plays and has been playing a very important role, shifting away from the original clearing role it was mandated to do in really integrating the various payment solutions and interconnecting and making connectivity reality, and also actively supporting a lower cost, increased efficient and speedier payment related solutions. So I think we very much value the input Channa has given to Lanka Clear. And then we have Jayanta Fernando, who is one of those who gave birth to the ICTA, the Information and Communication Technology Agency in Sri Lanka, who continues to be director of ICTA and also currently serves as a member of the Colombo Stock Exchange. And I think he has been playing a very integral part in improving and continuously challenging the regulatory framework and the legislative framework, which is a key ingredient in this world space. And then we have Senura, who is the manager of public policy for Facebook, which is again a very important stakeholder in this whole ecosystem. Facebook being something which probably touches the lives of almost every one of us, has also seen a gradual shift from being a typical social media tool, now actually getting into e-commerce and also moving into exploring payment solutions. So his presence here and his contribution will also be a very important ingredient. So let me, with those brief introductions, first invite Mr. Kumaratunga to make his presentation. I would invite each of you to confine your comments to a maximum of 10 minutes, please. Okay, to you, sir.
Audio, Mr. Kumar.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Tyagaraja, for inviting, and good morning to all. So it's a timely topic, an interesting and timely topic today, the digital payments, challenges and opportunities during the pandemic. In Sri Lanka, as you may know, that cash is still king. And so we have many digital initiatives offered by our financial institutions, and the required infrastructure is also readily available. So however, in practice, cash take precedence. Still, the cash is looking as a king. This is largely due to the consumer mindset. So I think in future and time to time and step by steps, we have to change this environment. We are the central bank, so backed by national level support, have set out to initiate a paradigm shift in this thinking, so and promote digital transaction. So for this, I think scenario, as Tyagaraja said, we have initiated several steps from last few years actually to bring going forward to the less cash society. So let me start saying that we are in extraordinary times. The coronavirus pandemic is still in the tremendous shocks to the global economy as well as for the Sri Lankan economy. And we have seen lockdowns and containment measures on the unprecedented global scale. Central bank supervisors and also international financial institutions are seeking to migrate or mitigate the immediate impact on the real economy through extraordinary fiscal, monetary, and macroprudential measures. So, but perhaps a more immediate consequence of a pandemic that has affected government, central banks, financial institutions, and many business as a change in the way we work. So now today we have been the face-to-face meeting and conferences and have almost all been replaced by virtual conferencing. So we are experiencing first-hand global collaboration through technology and platform. So that is important. COVID-19 pandemic also accelerated trend in digital innovations. If you see the last few months, we have seen some numbers, maybe that Channa can explain. And so that already underway. And for example, current developments in the for digital payments underscore the importance of resilient and accessible central bank operated payment infrastructure, so that need to withstand a large range of shocks, including pandemic and cyber attacks. If there is a silver lining in this crisis, in just 3 months, we have seen power and potential of how technology can support and improve the way we work. So this has reinforced that technology is indispensable in our globally connected world. So the recent years, we have seen growing interest from financial institutions and most of the other sectors in the use of technology to support new business models and to solve regulatory and compliance requirements more effectively and efficiently. We know that under central bank, we are working with the Monetary Law Act and also the Payment and Settlement Act 2005. So with that, we have given the power for the Central Bank of Sri Lanka to engage with this payment and settlement system and giving some more innovations, products to the country. As you may aware that the CBSL has announced digital year of digital transition in 2020, as Tiaga said. At the beginning of this year, we have had the plan for the whole year. And even though that 3 months time, we are work at the home, but continuously, and the Lanka Clear, Commercial Bank, and other financial institutions, including CBSL, work together to bring our products to the market and to make some awareness of the customers and the merchants. So as in the world where every aspect of our lives becoming digital, CBSL has taken a lot of efforts to improve the digital infrastructure in Sri Lanka. So as innovation is an integral part in the payment system and financial services, CBSL has taken several measures in this connection. So we'll go one by one, and some of the measures we can discuss at the Q&A sessions also. The main innovation is that payment system roadmap for the 3 years plan. So we have announced this roadmap 2020 to 2022 3 years plan, and it has approved by the Payment and Settlement Department and also the National Payment Council, which is a member of some of the banks and other financial institutions. There's a main 7 broad themes are there for the payment system roadmap. The first one is that expanding potential of interbank payment infrastructure is the main focus we are getting for expanding all the bank products to the market, and also promoting e-payments. And thirdly, standardization and interoperability of the systems. Fourth, innovation for payment system and financial services. Also, conducive regulatory environment, strengthening the payment system security, and public awareness and engagement in e-payments. So those are the major sectors we have focused on this payment and settlement roadmap for next 3 years. Actually, we have started 2019 and we are planning for the 2022. And all the players in the roadmap, we have appointed the committee to monitor these each and every sector. So there is a committee including all the maybe in the CIOs and the senior officials of the commercial bank to link with this how this achievement or the KPI can be achieved during the period. Each and every sector we have assigned the target for all the commercial bank, Lanka Clear, and the CBSL. So if we go by one, I don't want to explain each and every item, but expanding the potential of interbank payment infrastructure, the main focus is that increasing the participation in the Just Pay. And we have given the time target Q2 2020, but according to the, I think, crisis period, so we have to extend this time period. And promote cardless ATM transaction is also in the agenda. So in addition to that, facilitate acceptance of the electronic payment by public and private institutions like via the LPOP, Lanka Payment Online Platform, which is a custom and the inland revenue may be connected. And other, I think more than 5 to 8 institutions, government and the private institutions also can connect through the LPOP to the SEFT scenario. So which normally we know that the SEFT can be transferred 5 million, but through the LPOP, it has expanded more than, in some cases, 10 million and 10 billion actually, in some cases. And direct debit is also on the way. And some of the, I think some banks already joined the direct debit facilities. And development of the capital market and share customer payments on the share purchases and all dividends and the IPO refunds. We are planning to have these using the direct debit facilities. So in addition to that, our main target is that reducing some of the fee structure existing. I think currently we are using for the SEFT, RTGS and other payment scenarios like slips and the ATM maybe, and the MDR. So this is also one target for the promoting e-payments in the Sri Lanka. And I think yesterday also, I think I had the discussion with the commercial bank senior officials and also some of the TV discussions. At that time also, the major thing is that transferring money to the SEFT is 50 rupees is quite high. So that is what some of these I think senior officials raise. Because in some cases, if I do the transaction by transaction, then of course 50 into 5, it is too much in some customers. So they have to reconsider on that one. And promoting NFC and the cardless, card not present payment, and promoting e-payments among minors. So those are the major target for this one, and also national card schemes and implementing the transit card, store value card, and standardizing of the user interfaces for ATM and the POS machines. So those are the major things we have to discuss, and we are focusing next year time. And in addition to that, standardization of the forms for the KYC CDD rules and eKYC, shared KYC, video KYC. So these things also in the target. And we are in the process of RTGS, implementing the new RTG system of the country. Now we are working with the World Bank, and now RFP not to be called for this one. And at present, the regulated sandbox we already launched, and Open API we already established a committee for this one to do this API-driven interfaces for the open banking environment. And digital payment platform, there's a new scenario. So there are many items we have targeted, and so I think during the Q&A session, I can make some more involvement and so give some more explanation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumarthungu, for those opening comments. And I must say, for those who are not in the banking industry during the COVID time, this was one regulator who set up a WhatsApp group with all the bank CEOs, and the support which we got was literally from 5 o'clock in the morning till midnight on issues. And as and when issues, I think we've got to give this gentleman credit, really taking issues on the ball while things were actually rolling and getting things cleared for us. So that I think is a great point to appreciate. I know that Mr. Kumarthungu at some stage in the next few minutes will bow out for another online session and join us probably in about a half an hour time in time for Q&A. So thank you very much, sir. Now I will invite Channa De Silva to make his observations on the good work Lanka Clear has been doing in this space. And maybe Channa, while you're also elaborating on this, you might want to give us a taste of how you saw the surge in some of the electronic volumes during that particular period, which also I think has a positive connotation in how people have been adapting this. So over to you, Channa.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Tyagaraja. I think when you said initially that Lanka Clear's role changed from a clearinghouse to a facilitator, I think that is what we are sort of looking at ourselves as. We are a facilitator for any and every type of payment in the country. So it's not limited to digital, but any type of interbank payment. But we are more of a facilitator. So I think I just want to, before I get into this thing, I want to sort of explain the logic of how and why we the way we move about. First of all, we looked at actually the market as a whole as Sri Lanka, and then we looked at how should we move about. So when you look at certain statistics in Sri Lanka, we have about 21.3 million population, and we have almost 47% internet penetration among that population, and we have about 30% or 6.4 million people using smart devices or mobile devices to access social media. So when we are looking at penetrating digital payments into people's lives, the last number stands out, that we have almost a 6.5 million target audience where we should be able to convert, because they are already using social media, using mobile devices. So this is a key factor that we looked at. But the same way, if we compare this factor with a country like Thailand, they have almost 70 million population, which is about 3.5 times, and the internet penetration is about 75%, and their mobile social media use on mobile devices is about 75% of the population. So the biggest difference why this discrepancy is actually the population in Thailand, 50% is urban, whereas the population in Sri Lanka is it's only 18% who are urban, 82% is rural. So unless we address this gap of penetrating into rural, we will never come even close to Thailand. So this is one aspect that we have looked at in terms of penetrating digits. So this is one factor that we looked at. The second factor is who's our target audience. Basically, the generation that is coming into work as well as others is what we call Generation Z, right? Or Generation Z. So the years of the millennials and the baby boomers are going away. So when more and more people of Gen Z coming into market, which is people who are born with the smartphones, the smart devices, they have only an average attention span of 8 seconds. And they also, use more than 25% of them use mobile devices more than 10 hours a day. And they prefer online shopping, they prefer, free shipping. So this is the target that we are moving into. So considering all that, so basically we understand that the market is moving towards digital anyway, whether it's COVID or not, in terms of a generation. But obviously what COVID did was COVID came in. The biggest problem we have had prior to that is the adoption by the consumers of different services. I mean, banks have multiple different services, internet banking, mobile banking, fintech apps, so many things are there, but the adoption has been, not there. So when we looked at all that, so one of the bottlenecks that we saw was previously, a customer of a bank had to use only an app of that bank or only an instrument of that bank, which was sort of a restriction for the bank, because obviously they are investing in that application, and if they can cater to a larger audience, then that sort of might increase adoption. So that was sort of the logic. That's where we launched what we call the service of JustPay. It's a very simple concept. It's not an instrument. It's not an app. It's an instrument. It's a payment mode where a customer of any bank can sign up with an app of any bank using his banking credentials, account number, bank of wherever his account resides, and one-time registration. And once that is done, he adds his bank account. Then when he makes a payment, automatic debit request goes from the acquiring bank of the app to the customer's bank, and a payment is made. So it's a pull payment. So what it means is a small, fintech company can partner with the smallest bank. Now the entire banking population is open to them. So the fintech app has the entire population as the market. So which is the difference that we gave, enabling the pull payment. So when we look at that, we have seen, the adoption numbers. I'll get to adoption numbers. In terms of the payment adoption, what we've seen during the COVID era, we saw internet banking usage. Even though almost more than 50%, or I would say maybe 15 to 16 banks have internet banking facility, but the usage of that has been fairly poor. But what we saw during COVID was the usage of internet banking went up by almost about 600%. And when we look at JustPay enabled apps, we have about 15 apps that are enabled with JustPay payment mode. And we have almost about 15 banks who have enabled JustPay for their customers. We saw almost a 200% growth month-on-month customer registrations. We saw 100% growth of customer transaction month-on-month happening. And these are small ticket retail payments with the average transaction values of about 2,500, below 2,500 rupees per transaction. And we saw the system exceeding 1 billion rupees worth of transaction a month since May. So which is a significant progress from where we were last year. So I think that sort of gives the flavor of the potential growth. And then in order to capitalize on this, we looked at actually numbers. So another area where we looked at was why didn't the payments grow previously? So we looked at the card market. usage of debit and credit cards. So Sri Lanka as a whole, the banks have issued more than 25 million debit cards and more than 1.7 million credit cards. And there are roughly about 80,000 point of sale terminals in the market. And when you do a simple math based on central bank's payments bulletin numbers, we found that average transaction per POS terminal a day is less than 4, both debit and credit together. So which is very, very poor number. So what it means is people have cards, but they are not using that card for a debit or a credit payment, whereas they are using that card to withdraw money from an ATM. So this shift is what we had the problem. So hopefully, at least from a good side of COVID, that push people to use digital. So which we have seen. So another area where we saw was actually, what we call this peer-to-peer payments. Now when we say peer-to-peer, it's I'm sending money to my friend. That's a peer-to-peer. But we saw a bigger picture of peer-to-peer, because what we saw was, the bottom of the pyramid, if I may call them merchants, if I want and go to the Sunday fair and buy vegetables, right? And the person who's selling vegetables is not a merchant, it's an individual. So when I make a payment to that vegetable seller, right? I'm making a payment peer-to-peer. It's a person to person. There's no person to merchant. So that's where we saw huge opportunity, not just payment transactions between individuals, but also can be addressed at the bottom of the pyramid where it's an individual. So that's where we launched what we call payment exchange name, which is a simple process. Right now, if you want to send a payment to another bank customer, you have to know the bank account, branch, bank account number, bank, and all those information you have to provide. Right? So if I'm going to make a payment to the vegetable seller, that person is not going to tell me what my bank account number, all that. So what we did was basically we introduced a centralized system where the banks will be allocating a nickname for every bank account and associate that with the registered mobile number. So if I want to make a payment to somebody, all I need to know is that person's mobile number and the nickname. And when if you have an app, if you just use somebody from the contact list, it'll show the nicknames that other person has. So it can be, so only requirement for this nickname is it has to be unique per mobile number. So if I have 3 bank accounts across 3 banks and I have given the same mobile number, I will have 3 nicknames. So if I want to send money to my brother, domestic brother in a far off place, all I need to know is that person's mobile number and the nickname. Then the backend, it gets translated. And the beauty of that is, I think Mr. Kumaratunga talked about the SEF fees. Central Bank, we got together with Central Bank. We have drastically reduced the peer-to-peer fund transfer costing in that. So the customer fee has drastically come down based on slab. So the lowest brackets, 500 rupee, 1,000 rupee, it's a very minimal fee for the customers. And 2 things I want to talk about. One is, I think Central Bank, even though Mr. Kumaratunga didn't talk about, how do we address this bottom of the pyramid merchants? The vegetable seller in a Sunday fair, or somebody selling king coconuts on a cart. So that's where we with Central Bank we launched Lanka QR. So because all these micro merchants are not going to have a POS terminal. So all you need is a sticker of Lanka QR. What does that sticker contain? The payment credentials, where the money need to go. If I'm making a payment to somebody, I need to know where to send the money. So that sticker is only going to contain the information where I should send the money. So I scan it with any app I have, and I make a payment. The money will go from my account to the merchant's account. If you want to call them merchant, these are probably individuals. So that either individual account or merchant account, the money gets transferred. So it's a very simplified way of, making payments. And then how is this entire network enabled? This is enabled through digital certificates. So the way it works is Lanka Clear operates the only digital certificate authority in Sri Lanka, which is branded as Lanka Sign. So when you are registering for one of these services, especially the Just Pay payment mode, you get a digital certificate issued to your mobile in real time. And then when you register, you sign a mandate with your app, the acquiring bank of the app, whatever app that you use. And then you digital certificate to sign that mandate. And also some of the banks have implemented digitally signing the transaction to ensure that the transaction record is kept. That is done through LankaSign digital certificates. So basically, LankaSign digital certificates can be used for payment transaction processes, document signing, email signing, and for multiple purposes. And Sri Lanka Customs has also implemented, in addition to the payment, as Ms. Kumaratunga talked about through LPOP, they have also enabled document submission electronically using digital signatures, and the traders can now digitally sign and submit documents. And we have seen the adoption of digital certificates. Almost all financial institutions, like more than 45, use digital certificates. And Chamber of Commerce is using digital certificates for more than 150 of their exporters. We have issued more than 200,000 digital certificates to mobile devices for mobile payments. And Customs project, we have about more than 240 organizations who are using digital certificates, and including Central Depository System of Colombo Stock Exchange is also. So these are the enabling infrastructure that we have built, in partnership with Central Bank. We have been the implementer of most of this payment system roadmap, and I think that is where we are. And hopefully, COVID has given us a push, and we feel the adoption has increased and will continue to increase. Thank you.
Very much, Channa. I think it was an eye-opener to see the type of additional services LankaClear has been offering, especially in the space of digital certification. It was certainly an eye-opener to me. Now let me invite, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions during Q&A. Let's now invite Jayantha Fernando to make his observations. Jayantha, I would also, in your presentation or comments, would like you to share in particular maybe some of the work you had done in promoting some of the work on international trade on Custox, which I think will be an eye-opener for some of those members from the Ceylon Chamber. Over to you, Jayantha.
Thank you, Mr. Tyagaraja. Firstly, I thank the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce for organizing another important session titled Digital Payments, Challenges and Opportunities during the pandemic. Having said that, while commending the Ceylon Chamber for organizing this fantastic event, I also would like to specifically thank Mr. Tyagaraja and each of the panelists who have taken their time off to join this session. I think what is important is that while the title talks about challenges and opportunities during the pandemic, while the pandemic itself has become a global and challenge all of our countries, business. I believe the new normal that has come out from the COVID has created vistas of opportunities in a tremendous manner, and we think from a ICTA and governmental plus the other hats I wear, we all work collectively together with our stakeholders to look at this as an opportunity to broad base digitization and empower communities in a significant manner so as to harness the potential of all our people to take Sri Lanka to the next level of digitization. So having said that, my remit today is to supplement some of the fantastic comments made by my good friend Mr. Kumaratunga as well as Channa De Silva, who explained about the ecosystem, evolving ecosystem surrounding digital payments in Sri Lanka. As you can see, we are first in South Asia on number of fronts. So while we have a very advanced payment and settlements legal regime in Sri Lanka, and regulated very effectively by the Monetary Board with the support of the Payment Systems and Settlement Systems Department led by Mr. Kumaratunga. We have crucial lead agencies like Lanka Clear providing cutting-edge solutions that help to implement the laws, the digital laws that have been enacted over the years. So let's look at the risk mitigating factor, namely how the digital law environment created within the Sri Lankan system has enabled and facilitated digitization of our economy, digitization of our government, as well as all our transactions. So the primary tool when we talk of digitization and payment and settlements is the Electronic Transactions Act, number 19 of 2006. Now, what is important is that if you look at the head note, it is a law to facilitate and recognize various categories of transactions, including electronic contracts, and to legalize and legally make valid digital government initiatives in the country. This law has very clear objectives and a mandate to facilitate domestic and international electronic commerce and encourage the use of reliable forms of electronic commerce. Channa mentioned about the availability of digital certificates. I'll come to the specific legal provision, but the reliability, effectiveness, and the authenticity, validity of electronic commerce or business transaction is contingent on the use of digital certificates, and that whole ecosystem commenced through the legal foundation established under the Electronic Transactions Act number 19 of 2006. Now, what is important to realize is that this Act, Electronic Transactions Act, has not remained static. It has progressed over the years. And Sri Lanka became the first country in South Asia to domestically ratify and adopt the only internationally available international law instrument. We call it an international treaty on the subject of electronic commerce and transactions, namely the UN Electronic Communications Convention. Sri Lanka we at ICTA did a gap analysis supported by Central Bank and all of our partner agencies in the Ministry of Justice. We started a gap analysis of our Electronic Transactions Act in 2014, culminating in a series of recommendations, which eventually went to Parliament in 2017. So what I want to emphasize is that the Electronic Transactions Act has not remained static. It was upgraded through Act number 25 of 2017, which enabled Sri Lanka to join the only available international law treaty on electronic commerce and transactions, namely the UN Electronic Communications Convention. So Sri Lanka was a partner in this ecosystem with the international lawmakers at UNCITRAL from 2005. That work continued unhindered over the years and resulted in a groundbreaking amendment, and Sri Lanka ratified and became a full state party of this only international electronic commerce legal instrument. What that does is that whatever you do domestically in the field of electronic commerce, electronic contracts in relation to electronic documentation has cross-border legal validity in countries that have adopted the same. So today is that the Sri Lankan electronic legal ecosystem has evolved to a level where, in addition to giving legal validity to domestic transactions, we give legal validity and enforceability to international trade, commerce, and related transactions as well. So the Electronic Transactions Act takes care of so many aspects in relation to contracts, e-government, as I mentioned earlier, and provides the legal foundation to ensure that anything where a writing and a signing requirement is imposed by law, the electronic version is also legally valid. So what I want to emphasize is that in that realm of things, the law goes one step further by saying that electronic evidence gathered through the course of a B2B or business to consumer or governmental digital transaction can be also presented to a court of law, and you can get legal validity and recognition to those transactions in a court of law. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to emphasize is that the law has evolved over time. There have been a number of judgments that have been given, especially by the Court of Appeal of Sri Lanka, that has significantly expanded the scope and ambit of the Electronic Transactions Act in a significant manner. Having said that, I need to emphasize on some new developments. I know I keep asking the question whether this Electronic Transactions Act has realized the full potential. Well, I do not believe it has reached the full potential yet. As Channa and Mr. Kumaratunga outlined, if we take digital to the rural community, then only this law would reach its full potential. I still know, even when I look at the calls and the messages and the emails I get from the corporate sector and the SME sector, I realize there is not enough sufficient awareness about the scope and ambit of electronic transaction, and people still are having a doubt with regard to whether digital transactions and electronic signatures are legally valid. So the law is in place. It has been upgraded to international standard, and it has reached new heights. And do not have any fears. If you have any concerns, you can always write to us, and we will provide a clarification. But the emphasis that this law has enabled and facilitated all kinds of electronic commerce, trade-related transactions. And then coming to Mr. Tyagaraja's specific question, I want to emphasize in relation to new developments in recent times, given the lack of awareness and concerns that the import-exporters as well as many other private sector folks have had about the ambit of this law, the Chamber of Commerce commissioned Verite Research to conduct comprehensive research about how well this Electronic Transactions Act has been implemented domestically. And they came out with some very groundbreaking, innovative recommendations. And out of those recommendations that were discussed at the Ceylon Chamber, we were also partners in that exercise. And I'm happy to say that about 2 years ago, we had the Customs Department making a groundbreaking move to enable digital submission of customs declarations. And for that purpose, the challenge was whether a digital signature can be used effectively. Now, there were a lot of areas and concerns raised by governmental officials, and some of us got involved directly with the Minister of Finance and the Customs Department and helped them get a legal opinion from the Attorney General himself, who certified and said, look here, please use the Electronic Transactions Act as presently worded, use Section 7 that gives legal recognition to electronic signatures, and enable your stakeholders of customs to do end-to-end transactions digitally and publish on your website the guidelines and the method through which online transactions will be done. There are several new examples in the context of COVID which are happening even now. For example, in this subject was ramped up effectively, and I'm proud to say many of our stakeholders have taken this subject seriously, digital adoption seriously, and used the act to their benefit. So, for example, some of the listed companies decided to have hybrid annual general meetings as an example. And then you see in recent times the Securities and Exchange Commission and Colombo Stock Exchange jointly working together to harness the potential of the digital ecosystem using the electronic transactions and have gone a step further to work, fast track their work by amending the listing rules and CDS rules, for example, to facilitate onboarding of digital customers. I will come into those examples a little later in the Q&A. And with that note, I thank you, Mr. Tyagaraja. I thank the Ceylon Chamber for using this opportunity to make people aware of the potential available to the existing legal framework in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jayanta. That was a very comprehensive status update on the evolution of the baseline legislation on the Electronic Transactions Act and what it actually can do for all of us in digital commerce. More during Q&A. And then the final, let me invite the final panelist, Senura from Facebook, to give his perspective as to how a tool like FB plugs into this whole ecosystem. Over to you, Senura.
Thank you, Mr. Tyagaraja, and thank you very much to the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce for organizing this panel discussion, and I'm very happy to be here. As you know, with the explosion of the internet and the use of smartphones across the globe, there's been a highly increased focus and faster adoption of digital payments through innovative use of new technologies and also favorable government policies and regulations. Payments, when you talk about payments, is just one of the many finance services of a financial services ecosystem. And it can be credit, insurance, investments, or even pensions. We as Facebook, we have seen like a four-way seismic shift in the global trends. One is the technology, that technology is evolving and has become the backbone of the existence of all businesses. And especially in the post-COVID situation, this has been amplified even. Going digital, of course, ensures a scalable and sustainable business. And we also have seen the entry of non-traditional players. Globally, we have seen a trend emerge where banks or financial institutions assuming the role of a manufacturer, while fintech firms are becoming their retail channel partners. And this entry of new non-traditional players is crucial to the evolving digital landscape. The fintech players provide that agility and the affordability and consumer-friendly technology interfaces, and the bank and financial institutions provide wherewithal to underwrite the financial products and services. As Mr. Channa Silva also mentioned, this is the time of the millennial and the instant gratification, where time is of the essence is important, and that is where the fintech players do play a very, very demanding role. At the same time, we also have seen globally the response of regulators who create policy and regulations to enable this ecosystem to function efficiently. And I believe the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has taken its first step by creating a sandbox. And this would enable them to come up with more efficient regulation, facilitating business. For Sri Lanka, if you look at why digital payments make sense, I mean, if you look at the numbers, like over 80% of Sri Lankans adults have access to a bank account. But and this is a very, very high number when you take the regional numbers into account. But when you look at the percentage of those who have used or transacted using the bank account, be it a deposit or a withdrawal, it is nearly 30% of that population has not used the services. So with this, with the low ticket transactions, that creates that opportunity for the space to play a big role in connecting the unconnected, if I may say, and onboard more people from a financial inclusion point of view. For Sri Lanka and for Facebook, that is, like Facebook has two products that they are working on. One is Facebook Pay, which is like a checkout function that we are adding to our services, so that any user would have a seamless experience if you want to buy something on Facebook to just pay through the Facebook interface. So Facebook Pay has been launched in the US, and it's been quite successful. We have launched it to an extent in Sri Lanka with respect to gaming. And we have launched it almost across the world, except for a few countries, which requires you to add your, let's say, a card that you use to pay, and that take you to the checkout function when you are making a payment if you're purchasing something on Facebook. So that is one of the products that we are working on. Other is a cryptocurrency wallet that is an early stage development, and that is known as Novi, and that is connected to the Libra Association, the blockchain. And this is an early stage product, and it has not been launched as yet. So there is a bit of a runway to launch a product of that nature. Of course, regulation does play a big role in enabling these types of products to be launched in different countries, how these transactions would be regulated, whether cross-border transactions would be permitted. All those issues are still being dealt with, and different countries may adopt different standards. And Facebook, as a company, we do comply with the local regulation when we do implement or launch products in a market. The other aspect with respect to Facebook Pay, we guarantee the security of the data, and we have taken steps from authentication, where you can opt to use a PIN or even your biometrics on the device to authenticate payments that you would like to make using the Facebook's products. And also, if you enable something like Facebook Pay to make payments, it is seamless across the apps. So that's something that we are working on, so that if you enable it on Facebook, Pay on Instagram and WhatsApp, across the family of apps that Facebook does manage. But I have to say at this stage, like, this is something, these are very early stage products. So we are launching it for use cases in particular markets. And for Sri Lanka, we have enabled it for game. Looking at Sri Lanka's, the opportunities that Sri Lanka poses, as a company, we would roll out products as we go forward. As you know, WhatsApp Pay is also a product that we have developed, given the technology that WhatsApp has been built on, and that is yet to be launched formally in the region. So these things do take time, and depending on what the regulation is on the ground, how it can be easily integrated into the architecture that is available in Sri Lanka, will all play key roles in getting Facebook to implement such products in the market. With that, I would just like to end my initial comments and probably take some questions when it's posed.
Thank you very much, Senura. I think it was certainly eye-opening to hear about FB Pay as well as WebEx Pay and what is in store in perhaps the months and years to come. So now we get into the Q&A session. We already have a whole series of questions by some of you on chat. I will try to direct them to particular members of the panel. But let me first use the moderator's prerogative and direct my own personal question to Mr. Kumaratunga first. Mr. Kumaratunga, during the session, your presentation, you spoke about the sandboxing framework and the way we have introduced and encouraged fintech players to also come in through a sponsorship of a participating bank to get into this area. So I think that's a very good initiative, and I know that the NPC, the National Payment Council, is facilitating that. But for the benefit of the users, those who have registered today, perhaps we can pick maybe one example of such a sandbox initiative. And I would like to ask you to just tell the audience of the work being or the progress being done on the sandboxing project regarding shared KYC, because the cost of onboarding efficiently and electronically customer onboarding is certainly a very important thing in terms of cost of acquiring. So it will be useful to know what progress has been made in that direction.
So thank you, Tiaga, and I think it's a very important areas you have made me. And first is that sandbox we launched in the regulated sandbox in February 2020. So with that, our main aim to provide the live environment for the limited time for the fintechs to operate before scaling to the mass market level. So that is our major aim for this sandbox. So therefore, establishing the regulated sandbox. There are two sandbox maybe. In some countries, they are having the two sandbox like Malaysia. So they have the government sandbox and also the government and the private PP and also the regulated sandbox. Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia also have the separate sandbox. If any projects going in addition to the payment system, then it is going to the government side, the PPP environment sandbox, and any payment system related mechanism, then it is going to the Bank Negara Malaysia sandbox. So likewise, in our case, it is we have only the one sandbox. If any party willing to submit their proposal, in our proposal, our sandbox regulation is that they have to come to the financial institutions. Then after financial institution is going to the sandbox environment, because they are the expert in the payment system at present, and they are the people who have in the payment system product at present. They are running the payment system product. Then they are having some more experience, and they are the banks, the financial institution. They also have the risk team and the compliance team. Then first, before submitting to the CBSL, then so it can submit to the financial institution. Then we are expecting come from the proposal from the financial institution. So that is what our major aim. And at present, there are 3 to 4 proposals are received, and we are evaluating that one. So this is, I think, good opportunity for the fintech companies to bring their products to the sandbox. At present, it is called the regulated sandbox. So any other, and also that you touch on the shared KYC using the blockchain technology. and we advertise this one and appoint the committee first. And I got the report from the committee. After that, we call for we want to make a framework for this shared KYC, and we advertise that one, and we got the more than 33 proposals from the local and foreign. 18 proposals came from the foreign parties, and now we select the 3 parties and sign the agreement, and non-disclosure agreement and non-disclosure agreement. And 3 parties are working on the developing of the POC now for the blockchain, using the blockchain technology of the shared KYC. So that's the current scenario, and I think we have given the time period. Within the 4 months period, they have to submit their the product, and this is doing as a national project and free of charge. And 1 foreign company is involved, and 2 local companies also there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumaratunga. I think it's very great to note that the project is on fast track. There is a question I'll direct this to Channa. This relates to MDR on card payments. The question is, there's a perception that the barrier to increase usage of cards is a reflection of a higher prevalence of MDR charges. Is there anything the regulator or LankaClear could do to further refine and make it more competitive? Your thoughts?
Actually, I'll address Mr. Kumaratunga. I think we are doing this in collaboration with Central Bank. So this is not a perception; it's a reality. It's not a perception, right? Because obviously, I mean, this is so much a fact for micro merchants or smaller merchants at the bottom of the pyramid. I'm talking about the grocery seller who's selling, bread or vegetables, right? And probably a seller of bread probably has about 5% profit margin from bread. And in the current context, they have to part 3% MDR with the bank, right? So obviously this is a no-starter. So because of that, a lot of smaller SME or bottom of the pyramid merchants do not accept card payments as of now. So that is also one reason for this, the statistics I said, less than 4 transactions per terminal. So what it actually means is there will be hundreds of transactions at supermarkets, but there are 0 transactions at thousands of terminals. Nobody is doing any transactions. So that is so looking at this, I think together with Central Bank, we came up with lower MDRs. I mean, if you really look at Just Pay payment mode, it has less than 1% MDR for most of the transaction. Actually, less than 0.5% MDR for most of the transactions. At the bottom of the bottom end, like very low end, it goes slightly higher, but for majority of the transaction, it's less than 1%. And with Central Bank got monetary board approval, I couldn't actually touch on the national card scheme. I think Mr. Kumaratunga talked about that a little bit. Central Bank has got monetary board approval. The MDR on the national card scheme is 1%, kept at 1%. So that is another initiative, and I also want to touch Lanka QR. I think Central Bank launched, together with us, launched Lanka QR, I think last year, and for that also, for the moment, I think it's 0.5% MDR, but maximum it will not exceed 1%. So I think we, together with Central Bank, we are aware of this issue, and we want to get, as I said, 82% of the population is rural, which means the majority of the merchants, SMB merchants, are rural. So if we are to do financial inclusivity or some level of financial inclusivity, if we don't get this SMB merchants on board, so that's one of the reasons why we are very conscious, and we have actively looked at it and brought the MDR down for most of this payment. Some other international card scheme payment, actually, we do not really have say in that, because that is determined by the card scheme. But I think for QR payments, Central Bank has put a mandate. All payment modes have to accept the QR MDR. So that I think sort of hopefully will address this issue in the future.
Thank you, Chandra. I have a question for Senura. If FB Pay is available for gaming, why not for B2B?
Yes. So thank you very much for that question. So when we launch products, I mean, it's very difficult to launch a product across the board. So since FB Pay is a new product, we have identified as the use case to be gaming for Sri Lanka based on the data that is available to us. And that is why FB Pay has been enabled for gaming. So as the use cases grow, this will be extended as and when, and if the regulations also permit that.
Okay, thank you. Jayanta, I'm going to throw a couple of questions at you, but the first question is, today you see a lot of startups and also players in the mobile payment space using various apps on smartphones, be it Apple, iPhone, or whatever it is, right? I am only wondering, as a layman, whether there is any risk of infringing any IP from Apple's perspective or iPhone's perspective. Are the local players running the risk of getting suddenly one morning the guy is switching off this facility? Just a thought. Any views on that?
Well, simple answer, Mr. Tyagaraja, is that when any of us download app, whether it's in Apple Store or in the Google Play Store or whatever, when you download, many of us forget that there is a contract, binding contract created between the user and the provider, right? So when you, for example, you and I can't just go and upload these apps to these stores. These are validated. So for example, Google has a validation process, security check, they do a code review, and then so does Apple in a much more stringent manner. And then the provider of that solution has to be bound by certain norms, including certain rules relating to intellectual property emanating from the WIPO Internet treaties. So those this is settled law internationally, and what we may not know is the fact that maybe lack of awareness that when you download an app, before you start using it, you have given concurrence to be bound to those terms and conditions, which are applicable in Sri Lanka because our Intellectual Property Act number 36 of 2003, although maybe requires a little bit more tweaking around and upgrading, it complies with the Berne Convention and the minimum obligations under the WTO TRIPS that Sri Lanka ratified in 1994. So we are compliant in that area. It's just, I think your point is well taken, Mr. Tyagaraja. Although we have complied with those norms on intellectual property, the domestic enforcement regime, despite the fact that we have a commercial high court with all island jurisdiction working very well from Colombo, enforcing IPR, there is a lot more that needs to be done.
Well noted.
Yeah, Ceylon Chamber should pioneer some reforms in that area.
Well noted. Thank you very much. The next question I have is actually a question as well as a statement. I'm going to direct this both to Channa as well as Mr. Kumaratunga, because it has a connotation for either Lanka Clear and or the central bank. It's a bit long-winded, but I think it's an important question. Several startups are facing significant challenges in partnering and or integrating with the mobile operators for direct carrier billing by adding to the bill. The statement is that there should be a centralization to create a single point of integration to all operators in Sri Lanka and standardization of fees. Are there any plans from either the central bank and or Lanka Clear to address this issue?
Mr. Kumaratunga, why don't you go first? Yeah.
So we can make it actually that once we open this, I think establish this open banking environment for the Sri Lanka, each and every person now what happened is that going to the HNB account, then he has to visit to the separate HNB account web page for the app. And in TB, we have to go to separately. My view for the next few years is that if I want to log into the web page or the one app, all the bank accounts should be in the one place. Then it is easy for me to access, or I can so check my balances and transfer my money to the one account to other account. And also if I want to make a fixed deposit from the savings account to the other one, it is easily we can do if we use this open banking. That is a scenario one. There are many other possibilities and access, and the facilities are there with if you go for this one. And come to this I think monitoring of this I think fee structure, or this depend on the environment or depend on the products which may they are using. So we can monitor that one, and we at present also that for example SEPT scenario, we are given the maximum of 50 rupees. We may able to reduce in next few months use of this digital transaction here. But this is maximum amount, and also RTGC is also same. That is maximum amount of 450 rupees from the CBSL side. I want to bring it down to the half of that one after we get the approval from the monetary board. But it's a maximum amount, and also the safe slips is also safe. And in some cases, we have seen in the JustPay users or JustPay, I think acquirers. So they are also having their own. For example, that in some foreign banks, they are giving the SEPT transaction free of charge. So they can decide, the bank wise or the financial institution wise, they can decide that one. So that is the environment we have to build. Earlier, you can remember that when you use these taxis, then it has I think competition for I think they are charging different type of prices. Now what happened was that with some kind of regulations now is each taxi or the three-wheelers having the meters, then the regulations are there. So maybe someone has not pushed to have this the meter of that taxi. So automatically they bring to the I think regulatory environment, so they are also behavior according to the requirement of the customers. So likewise that we have put the maximum amount from the CBSS side. Then it is up to the financial institution have the competition among these customers. They can use their I think on within this limit, maximum limit or maximum fees we have imposed. But in future, our focus is that with the roadmap, so we have to bring it down to the further. Okay, Chandan.
Mr. Yagaraja, if I address the telco question, I think the question, if I understand correctly, is that certain services you can add to your bill for the payment. But so the problem there is the telcos are regulated by TRC, not by central bank, right? So that's only one mode of payment. I mean, add to bill is one mode of payment. There are multiple modes of payment. If you want to even pay your telco bill, you can do it through your internet banking or mobile banking or fintech app, right? So you don't necessarily have to go with add to bill option. That's only one option, right? And the fee structure of telcos is determined not by central bank, it's by the regulator of the telcos, right? So that is where the disconnect is. I don't think we will have a universal fee structure across multiple departments that unless government brings a regulation or mandate across all saying it has to be free. So I think the choice is to the consumer to use whichever. As Mr. Kumaratunga very rightly said, what central bank has done is cannot exceed an amount. So central bank has not specified a minimum amount. Minimum amount can be zero, right? So that's where the banks are saying. Some banks are saying, okay, it will be zero for their customers. So what we're saying, the choice is given to the customer. If your bank is charging X amount, and if another bank is charging less than X amount, they have the option of switching. I mean, so that's the choice is given to the customer to go with the most efficient, way of doing their transactions. I think that's the more democratic way of doing that, rather than saying everybody and everything has to be one. So the choice is given to the consumer to pick whatever services and whatever payment mode. If they don't like card payments for whatever reason, they can switch to mobile payments or some other mode, which is cheaper or cost beneficial for them. So I think that choice is given. So picking and choosing which one is right is, I guess, up to the businesses and the consumers.
And early, you can remember that, give me 1 minute. And so at the NPC, National Payment Council, we have discussed about this, the SMS charges from the telcos. Then we made the TRC and we have bring down to the half of that one. Earlier they charged 50 cents. Now it has been down to the 25 cents. So this is with the involvement of the National Payment Council and the TRC. So likewise, so if there are any requirement or if we identify any requirement of this one, so we can collaborate with the, I think, TRC and do it definitely.
So I think a couple of observations. I think Chandna, you're right. With the availability of choice, the customer or the consumer has a choice to make. So that's a very good point. But I think, as Mr. Kumaratunga also alluded, while yes, there is a disconnect between the central bank, which is regulating the banks and the financial system, and TRC, which regulates the telcos, I'm sure at somewhere above there is the opportunity of the interregulatory collaborative effort to see if there is any arbitrage, to plug the arbitrage. So I think the same way the central bank intervened on the SMS, perhaps at some stage this could also be taken. So I think there were two viewpoints well taken. A question to Jayanta. While we also speak about the digital aspect of payments and digital transactions, one other thing which has also been in the play during the last decade as a cost efficient enabler has been the development of cloud and cloud computing. But in Sri Lanka, we still see, at least I as a practitioner, still see a reluctance of the banking and financial system being given the choice of making full use of this tool. As a member of ICTA, Jayanta, what is your perspective? If you have to go forward, how do you see integrating the increased use of cloud in this game?
Thank you, Mr. Tyagaraja, for that question. Well, I will give a kind of ICTA plus wearing my hat as chair of the Data Protection Drafting Committee perspective on this matter. I think the answer to your question is fairly straightforward. One of the lacunas that perhaps created the lack of potential for people to have clarity in the regulatory landscape to go on the cloud is going to be cured when the data protection bill comes into being, hopefully sometime this year, as fast as possible. The data protection law, which was spearheaded thanks to the drive, push, etc. by central bank, was also enabled by ICTA through our leadership and support from Central Bank and Securities and Exchange Commission and many other parties, including Ceylon Chamber. There was an extensive dialogue on this subject at the Ceylon Chamber Legislative Committee, where many issues connected with your question was being addressed. So if the answer is found in the certain draft provisions contained in the present version of the data protection bill, which says that there is opportunity for businesses to host data in cloud environments, provided they ensure specific protection measures and governance measures specified in that data protection bill with regard to the manner in which that data will be protected. So when it comes to very specific data like medical data and data connected with, let's say, our identity information, our registration and death information, immigration information. Now, all that kind of information held by government agencies are specifically regulated under the various laws governing those processes. Now, the data protection law says that information has to be domestically hosted. But other data, let's say those data held by a bank relating to customer, well, the data protection regulator eventually will have to have a consultation with the central bank and define the parameters under which such data, what category of that data can be hosted outside Sri Lanka and what can be located within Sri Lanka. So we have provided a matrix, and a very flexible matrix where, for example, the sectoral regulator will have to be consulted, and rules, regulations will be made eventually, defining this parameter very clearly. But when it comes to business commercial related transactions, there is a possibility within that law, flexibility within the law for hosting in different cloud environments at your option. But I would like to conclude this statement by saying, Mr. Tyagaraja, that many of the corporates have perhaps not realized we have already in Sri Lanka very advanced cloud environments available, let's say with SLT, Dialog. And then you have in relation to government services, we have the Lanka Government Cloud, the first government dedicated cloud created in South Asia by ICTA, available from 2013. So these things are perhaps not very well documented or publicized. And now under the new leadership of ICTA, led by the very dynamic board, Jayantha De Silva and his team, they have revitalized the Lanka Government Cloud to the next level of efficiency, and they are working towards a new framework, a governance framework, which is more effective, and we could see that being realized even by the private sector.
Thank you very much. In fact, my very concern and comment was based on the very premise that for so many years we have a Lanka government cloud sitting at the apex, which should have given any other stakeholder the confidence that the country believes in cloud. If so, why not extend that to certain participating sectors, including banking and finance? That was my continuous argument for that. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, and let's hope that we will see some more progress. We have probably time for one more question. I'm going to direct this to two people. I'm going to direct this to Senura as well as Channa to see whether we can get two different perspectives to this issue. Let me read it out. What can be done to improve the stability of payment gateways across web and app environments? There seems to be a multitude of connectivity issues between card issuing banks, internet payment gateways, and OTP vendors, which results in a very high rate of failed payment attempts. This certainly sours the consumer experience, and while some abandoned cards can be recovered via remarketing, it discourages the habit formation. No one is taking any leadership to resolve this. Senura, your thoughts on this from a Facebook point of view?
Yes, if it's a telecom infrastructure issue, I mean, it affects the whole ecosystem. And that is something that as a government or say even the chamber, if it is a big concern, that has to be taken up. And it would affect anyone, as in Facebook, Instagram, or whoever is providing that service may be affected if that is so. And I can't comment on the specifics here, but that's like a very general comment I can give at this stage on something like that, Mr. Tyagaraja. Thank you.
Thanks. Channa, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Only thing is I cannot really comment on the international card scheme covered payment gateways because we don't really engage with that. Maybe Mr. Kumaratunga has this thing, but overall I think I agree payment infrastructure has to be robust, and it has to work every time, anytime and every time. So I think that is the premise that we know. In our ecosystems, it has to be uptime of 99.999 whatever uptime. So for that, we are taking more than enough precautions for that, especially on the interbank side. But I guess if you look at, because some of these payment gateways are operated by banks, and we actually do not know the uptime of those are really maintained and the connectivity is properly maintained. I guess from a central bank perspective, maybe the bank supervision or somebody is really monitoring this. Mr. Kumaratunga, do you have any comment on that?
So next agenda is that actually in the Visa and Master, the international card schemes, because in India it is under regulation of the RBI, and so in our case we cannot make that I think regulatory part now, but we are closely work with this all the international card schemes and also the IPG, and I am also having concern some of the charges the banks are getting from the e-commerce side for using this IPG. That has to be some extent the different, the complaints are coming from the e-commerce traders, and they have to, especially the small e-commerce traders, they are complaining about the charges, high charges getting from the banking side. So we have to consider that one. If we can send that question to me, then I can attend that one, not immediately, but I think within this next few months time. So that is also in my mind actually. So we have to attend that one.
I will certainly WhatsApp it to you, Mr. Kumaratunga. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
We probably have time for just one more question, so I'm going to use the moderator's prerogative and throw this at Jayanta. This question, you may have some sensitivities as to how much you can answer, but within what you can, it will be useful, I think, for the general, the audience to get a perspective. National Digital ID. Can you give us some perspective as to the progress and what citizens Sri Lanka can expect within what you can publicly share, Jayanta?
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyagaraja. I appreciate your understanding as well, because we are at these latter stages of the design phase, and I must say this initiative has been long overdue, going back to more than 10 years, maybe more than that, maybe 15 years. And there have been many failed starts. And one important point I want to emphasize in creating some degree of confidence even to those who are taking part today is that I see a lot of hope now than ever before, more because of the fact that I see a very structured, balanced, and a very progressive approach taken by the people who are driving the Digital ID initiative, which is co-chaired by Jayanta De Silva, Chairman ICTA, and the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber, Dr. Hans Wijayasuriya. Both of them are doing, I would say, a pioneering initiative in a very structured manner. You know, the way in which the engineers do things rather than very ad hoc. This is not something to play around with. This is a very special initiative that requires a lot of planning, designing. Given the fact that both of them are engineers, I think I can see engineers in the room will appreciate the approach they are taking. To highlight, in fact, since I'm part of the team going to lead in the law reform and the legal audit aspect of it, what I can say is that as of now, we all have an identity regime. Sri Lanka has perhaps one of the most advanced identity legal regimes in this part of the world. But again, the potential of that has not been fully realized. So the ID card law goes back many decades, amended more than even the Constitution. And the last amendment came in through Act number 8 of 2016. And that law provides for a regime that the identity card department, namely the registration of persons department, can have where biometric onboarding of citizens can be enabled and facilitated. So a series of regulations were drafted under that law, including a regulation linking the identity regime to the Electronic Transactions Act. And that happened on the 21st of March, 2019. And we can see a step-by-step approach to this whole endeavor, spearheaded by the Department of Registration of Persons. And I must acknowledge at this occasion the leadership and drive and the facilitation provided by the department staff of the Registration of Persons Department, led by Commissioner General Vyani Gunathelaka. So their team has been working with the ICTA team jointly to drive the new design matrix. And what we will see, firstly, number one, is a framework where the identity card database will be cleaned up. We all know we need to have a very accurate record in relation to all of our identities for there to be a effective eKYC regime that Mr. Kumaratunga and the other speakers spoke about. For digital transactions, the eKYC regime has to be really clear, it has to be accurate, so that cleaning of the record and the database will gradually start once the technology design and the matrix has been put into place. And eventually, the biometric onboarding would happen, and which would require re-registration of all citizens. And this process would mean that the database of the identity card department will be linked to the election register. So if you go even now, Mr. Tyagaraja, to the election database or elections website, you type elections.gov.lk, just type your identity card number. You get your corresponding 12-digit SLIN number, which is the Sri Lanka identity number, which is the baseline identity number. So the cleaning up of the record based on that is going to take shape over the next 6 months to 1 year. And what will eventually happen under the Sri Lanka Unique Digital Identity Initiative, spearheaded by ICTA and Registration of Persons Department, would be that citizens of Sri Lanka and even companies would have a digital identity, because the digital identity would take the form of algorithm-based number, unique number, based on the characteristics, based on what we call the attributes of either a citizen or a company, and this will eventually be available even for a foreign visitor, right, to the country, so that they could do end-to-end digital transactions using that unique digital identity framework. And that identity will also be recognized under Section 7 of the Electronic Transactions Act. So based on what Senura said, all those services, digital end-to-end services, even cross-border services, can be effectively done once this system is ready. And I want to mention that the eKYC regulations of last year has now been used as an initial step by the Colombo Stock Exchange and the SEC, where I'm going to have a meeting now, to provide a matrix for onboarding of citizens even to the CDS account. Even now, the regime is available. So what is going to be done by ICT agents of Sri Lanka, ICTA, my technology team, Jayantha De Silva has been doing a superb effort leading our team, especially the engineering team. They are going to provide a tool for the identity card department to have a lookup system. So to type, the bank would, even a bank would make use of this when they want to digitally onboard a customer. they just put the identity number of the customer into that web service application provided by ICTA, and then you can digitally verify the identity of the customer. So gone will be the days in the next few months where the customers would necessarily have to visit the banks physically to verify their identity. So we are taking a step-by-step approach in conclusion, and the next phase will be the cleaning up of the identity card database with the onboarding, re-enrollment of the citizens with biometrics, and then providing your identity that can be used effectively in the digital space. Thank you.
CBSL also involved in this Ministry of Defense and also DRP.
Yes.
And our FIU also involved, and we had a few discussions with the DRP. So I think the next few months, so until this digital ID comes, each bank has I think a facility to directly access the database of the DRP after you sign in the agreement or the MOU with the banks and the DRP. So this is work in progress, and now we are deciding the factor on the charges of the customer fee when we are registering the fee structure.
So you are actually addressed my question. I was going to ask you whether it was going to be a subscription-based service. So obviously it is. So no, that's very useful. Thank you very much, Jayanta and Mr. Kumaratunga, for alluding and updating us on that very important topic. So that brings us to the conclusion of this very important and also an interesting seminar. Let me, on behalf of the organizers, thank the four panelists, Mr. Kumaratunga.
Yeah, and so
yes,
Mr.
yes.
Tyagaraja, if you excuse me 1 minute,
Sure.
that we also launched this the transaction, digital transaction here with that cash for day. And so this is, I think, different no problems with having this using the cash is we launched this one in March 2020. And this is going with the parallel of this QR code promotion, Lanka QR code promotion. And this IFC is supporting for developing some of the video clips and other banners and etc. So I want to mention that one. And so I think all of us and our customers and the merchants and as a nation, we have to contribute to this national project. I think next few months we are targeting with the Lanka Clear, and the Chan is also there in the marketing team. So we want to popularize this QR code in all over the country. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I also want to, this thing, actually, IFC has played a key role, I think, with their initiative of financial inclusivity. I think that is one of their themes. They have been very supportive because one of the problems that we have identified is the adoption, not the lack of services available, it's the adoption. So I think they have played a key role in coming up with some of the digital content, especially on the merchant side as well as the consumer side. So I think we need to thank that because it's a cumulative effort, and it's a collaborative effort. It's not effort by one party if it is creating this awareness. So I think the banks and everybody has to play this role. Thank you.
Well taken, Chanda. And I think we certainly appreciate the role IFC has been playing. And I think certainly as far as the Cashway initiative is concerned, I'm sure the Chamber Secretariat will take this seriously and also convey this initiative to the membership to also see that we replicate and improve the adoption of this. So in conclusion, let me thank Mr. Kumaratunga, Channa, Jayanta and Senura for taking time and giving their own different perspectives to 4 different pillars of this whole subject, vast subject, and also for the active participation of the registrants in asking some very pertinent questions, and to the Chamber Secretariat for giving me this opportunity to moderate this. So thank you very much, and let me wish you a very happy rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.